So today I'm going to be showing you various sculpting techniques using paper. The materials we're going to start with are, or supplies you'll need: pencil, ruler, X-Acto knife with a nice sharp blade. If it gets dull, which it does from even just from cutting paper, change the blade. This is a bone folder. It's a bookmaking tool. It's helpful in creating nice clean folds with your paper. A pair of scissors, glue stick, and you'll notice I'm working on a cutting mat. This will be helpful not only with cutting with the X-Acto knife, but also it has a grid on it, which will help me to make square cuts when I need to do that. So your ultimate goal, you are going to be making a paper sculpture, and sometimes it's hard to know where to start. Like, what can you do with paper besides crumple it up or draw on it, keep it flat? So just a couple of really nice examples here. This one, so you're going to be creating a sculpture that exemplifies two descriptive words. This one, I believe, was hanging, so you can see the objects are hanging off of the sculpture, and I think balance. So yeah, how do we create all these different things? You can see tubes and cubes and spirals, all sorts of things. I'll show you one more example. Nicely done one. I do not remember what his descriptive words were, but also just very nicely done. Okay. All right. So for starters, you do have access to these pre-made form sheets. So these will these are a very easy way to figure out how do you make a cube, how do you make a cone, various things like that. If you're making your own, I just want to show you, these have little tabs on them. I want to show you what's going to happen if you make your own and do not include tabs. Just the tabs are actually a very important part. So here's a cube a template for a cube that I made without tabs. And first thing I want to do is I'm going to actually take my ruler and line it up on each of these lines, and then take this bone folder and press. So I'm kind of making an indentation. I can also take this paper and press the bone folder against the ruler. So that's going to make a fold. And I've actually already gone ahead and done each of these. So I'll just do one more for you. So taking the ruler, lining it up right on the line, taking my bone folder and pressing, and then I also like to take the bone folder on the outside and press that side up. If you don't do that, you're going to have really kind of bendy, not straight edges. Okay, so you can see this would make a lovely corner for a cube. However, the issue is, how do we attach that? So without tabs, we have this great corner, but it's hard to get glue in that little spot. It's going to end up being quite messy. So let me show you. When you're working, you want to make tabs. So the tabs are just like a little extra piece. So it's like this cube is the same, except it has these little gray parts. They don't have to be gray. And those are going to be used in assembling the form. So once again, you want to take your ruler, and there's a lot of this to do because you have to do the tabs as well, and pressing and pushing. And I've already done each of these edges, so I'll just do one for you. Okay. So now, if I want to start to attach this cube, I have this little tab here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my glue stick, and glue stick works great for paper. You don't really need anything stronger. I'm going to put a little scrap paper here. I'm going to put glue on the tab. I flip this over, and then I can take this and fold. And I have a lovely corner for my cube because the gluing has happened on the inside, as you can see that. Okay. All right. And same thing, I would do this with each of my edges, and I'm going to have a really nice cube with nice clean edges. All right. So next up, tabs can also be used. They can be used to support. Help things to stand up. So let's say I had a strip of paper that I wanted to stand up on my page. Same thing, without tabs, it's going to be a little bit tricky to stand. So I'm going to cut And if you want this to be totally even, you probably want to make your cuts even, but I'm not too worried at the moment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold the paper forward and backwards. And those tabs I could put glue on the bottom of them, and I can attach my paper, so my paper can now stand up. Okay. So, other things you might want to do are, you might want to create a paper tube, and I can actually cut this into little bits if I wanted to have short little tubes. That would be fine too. If you want to create a paper tube, simple, it's pretty easy. My recommendation is it's surprisingly hard to start the tube smoothly. You can do it, but from an edge. So I would recommend starting to roll it from a corner. And notice I have a pencil here to roll around. Of course, if you wanted a larger tube, you could use something else. So I'm just going to roll this tightly around the pencil, and I'm sort of pulling the pencil out as I go because it's a little tricky to get out once I get towards the end. You could cut this piece of paper. We don't need to use an entire piece of paper for this. Once I'm getting to about here, I'm actually going to take my glue stick and cover this whole area with glue. The reason I'm using so much is this will give me the freedom if I want to cut this up into smaller segments of a tube. If I have the glue all the way, I'll be able to do that. If I just had glue on the end, most of the tube would fall apart. Okay, so I can then, this is nicely glued together. I would honestly let this dry, but I'll just show you. I think they'll stay together. I could then make little tubes. And I have little things like this that might be, somehow incorporated into my sculpture. Okay. All right. The next thing, if you have an interest in creating your own forms, this mat, as I mentioned, is really going to come in handy because it's going to help you to keep everything square. So I'm going to get a piece of paper, and I'll tell you, you can also take the prefab forms, and you can go and photocopy them as another option, and you can shrink or enlarge them. I mean, you can only enlarge them as big as a piece of copy paper, but you can certainly shrink them down. So that's one option. Makes it a little easier than drawing your own. But if you do want to draw your own, take my pencil and my ruler, and I'm going to line my paper up with the grid. That way, everything I do on here can be square, like nice corners, okay? So if I then take my ruler and line it up with grid lines, this line is going to be parallel to the edge of my paper and perpendicular to this edge of the paper. So let's say, you can use this. And of course you can use the ruler to measure if you want it a specific size as well. But once again, I'm lining, so to do a line perpendicular to this, I'm lining up the top of the ruler with the grid line at the top, bottom of the ruler, the grid line at the bottom. And now I would have to measure to make this, make these the right sizes, but I do now have a form that is perfectly square. All the angles are right angles. Okay, so that's useful. If you're interested in curling paper is similar to curling ribbon. So what I would do, you can curl just a strip of paper. You can also make a fringe, so I'll show you how to do both of those. So I'm just taking the X-Acto knife to cut little strips to make my fringe. All right, so to curl a single piece of paper, you are going to need your scissors. I'm going to open up the scissors. Same as curling ribbon, if you've ever curled ribbon. I'm taking my paper, lining it up with the inside of the blade, taking my thumb and pressing the paper against the blade, and then pinching with my left hand and pulling the paper. And you should get a nice curl. If I wanted to make fringe, same thing. So I already cut the little fringe pieces. And I can have them go in the opposite direction if I want by just turning the paper around. Or I could have them all go in the same direction is fine too. I can do them all at the same time or separate. Depends if you want kind of different curls. But there we go. We got a nice little fringe, which might come in handy. All right, just a couple more things. So one, if you are interested, let's say you have a form and you want to put another form through it, such as this tube. I want this tube to go through this cone. What I would do, if I already have this form created, I'm just going to take my X-Acto knife and very carefully attempt to kind of cut a little X in here. And I'm going to cut another X on the other side where I'm hoping that this will go through. You know what? And this form is a little flimsy, so it's not working super well. I think I can still get it. All right. So then I'm going to take this tube, and I should be able to press it through that hole, and I should be able to press it through the other side as well. Now this was not super well attached, but I think you get the idea. So there we go, a way to incorporate them into each other. The last one I'm going to show you is if you have, if you want to create something like this, so it's a cube or cuboid. It's not a perfect square, and you can notice it has cutouts from it. Okay, so if you want to cut that out, it's going to be a lot easier to cut out on your form before it is turned into a 3D form, so on your flat template. So all I'm going to do is use my X-Acto knife, and I can cut whatever shapes I want cut out of this. And then I would just assemble this the same way I had assembled all my other forms, which is to take the ruler and my bone folder and press, and ultimately then you'll end up with a some sort of form that has cutouts in it. Okay. All right, and I think that's all.